History isn't just dusty ruins and broken pottery. It's also filled with eerie, unsettling discoveries that make you question everything. Archaeologists spend their days piecing together the past, but every so often they dig up something truly disturbing. From an ancient dinosaur skull to tools made of human bones, here are 15 creepy ancient finds that will astonish you. Let's start off with number 15, Screaming Mummy. In 1886, Gaston Maspero, head of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, unwrapped a mummy known only as Man-E. What he found was disturbing, and let's be real, it is disturbing. We mean, just look at that. The body was crammed inside a plain coffin, wrapped in sheepskin, a material the ancient Egyptians saw as impure. But that wasn't the strangest part. Man-E's hands and feet were bound, and his face was twisted in what looked like an agonized scream, mouth frozen wide open. Unlike traditional mummies, his organs were never removed, suggesting his burial was anything but ordinary. Scholars believe he was either poisoned or buried alive, dying in excruciating pain. Maspero theorized that this could be Prince Pentawere, the son of Rameses III, who was executed after being caught in a plot to assassinate his father. Whether a traitor or an unfortunate soul, his haunting expression has captivated and horrified people for over a century. Number 14, Bog Bodies. Well, we all know that bog bodies are among the best preserved ancient remains in the world, thanks to the oxygen-starved, acidic environment of peat bogs. Instead of decomposing, their skin, hair, and even facial expressions are eerily well preserved, looking more like recent corpses than people who died thousands of years ago. The Tolland man, discovered in Denmark in 1950, was found lying peacefully on his side, a noose still around his neck. Scientists believe he was hanged, possibly as a human sacrifice. His serene expression is unsettling, his face so intact that it looks like he could wake up at any moment. But not all bog bodies look so peaceful. The Graubaul man, dating back to 400 to 200 BCE, had his throat slit open, his leg broken, and his body twisted in pain. Like the Tolland man, he was carefully placed in the bog, suggesting he was a sacrifice rather than a murder victim. The real mystery? Why these men were chosen, and what their people hoped to achieve by offering them to the earth. Number 13, Ötzi the Iceman. In 1991, two German hikers stumbled upon what they thought was a recently dead body in the Ötztal Alps. But this wasn't just any frozen corpse. This was Ötzi the Iceman, a 5,300-year-old hunter whose body had been perfectly preserved in ice. His clothing, weapons, and even his last meal were found intact, making him one of archaeology's most significant discoveries. But there's a dark side to Ötzi's story. His left arm was frozen stiff across his body, and for years, experts thought he had died from exposure. Then, in 2001, an X-ray revealed something shocking. An arrowhead was lodged in his left shoulder, with a matching entry wound in his back. This meant Ötzi was murdered, likely dying within minutes of the attack. He also had a deep head wound and cuts on his hand, suggesting he had been in a fight before his death. To make things even stranger, several people linked to Ötzi's discovery later died under mysterious circumstances, fueling whispers of an ancient curse. What do you think? Is this dude cursed? Number 12, Poland's vampire burials. Over the last decade, archaeologists across Eastern Europe have found graves that suggest people once feared the dead wouldn't stay dead. These so-called vampire burials were designed to prevent the deceased from rising from their graves. In 2013, a road construction project in Gliwice, Poland, uncovered decapitated skeletons, their skulls placed between their feet. At the time, people believed that removing the head stopped a corpse from coming back to life. Other graves show even more extreme measures. One skeleton was found with a sickle placed over her pelvis, while others had sickles positioned over their throats, a grim insurance policy ensuring that if the dead did try to rise, they'd be decapitated instantly. Some bodies were buried face down, and others had bricks forced into their mouths. The sheer violence of these burials paints a chilling picture of how deeply people feared the undead. Whatever these individuals did in life and in death, their communities made sure they weren't coming back. Number 11. Shackled skeletons. In 2016, archaeologists in Palaio-Faliro, a suburb of Athens, unearthed a mass grave containing at least 80 shackled skeletons. Their wrists were bound in iron, and many had their mouths gaping open as if they had died mid-scream. The skeletons all belonged to young, healthy men, making their deaths even more mysterious. Archaeologists suspect they were connected to the Cylon affair, a failed coup led by the Olympic champion Cylon in the 7th century BCE. After Cylon's plan to seize power collapsed, his followers sought sanctuary in Athena's temple. According to ancient records, they were dragged out and executed on the spot. Pottery found in the grave dates back to this period, supporting the theory that these men were Cylon's rebels. However, some scholars believe they could have been criminals or even enslaved people. But the careful way they were buried, rather than discarded, suggests they were seen as more than just prisoners. They were victims of a high-profile, brutal mass execution. Well, money has power. Number 10. A dragon skull on the beach? Now let's imagine this. Well, just imagine you're walking along the beach minding your own business, when suddenly, there it is, a massive bone-white skull half buried in the sand. Your brain immediately jumps to one thing: dragons were real. For a brief moment, the world made sense. Then reality kicked in. The skull wasn't an ancient fossil, it was a Game of Thrones marketing stunt, placed there to promote Season 3. Impressive? Yes. Soul-crushing? Also yes. But in 2017, things got even weirder. In a rural Chinese village, locals discovered a 60-foot skeleton with a massive skull and 2 comically tiny arms. Unlike Western dragons, this thing resembled the serpent-like creatures from Chinese mythology. No scientists stepped in with an explanation, leaving the find shrouded in mystery. Was it an elaborate hoax? A misidentified creature? Or something we weren't meant to see? Some legends refuse to die, maybe for a reason. Number 9. The mummy inside the Buddha. Restoring a centuries-old Buddha statue sounds like a peaceful gig. Basically and technically it is, but it's not that good until you crack it open and find a human skeleton inside resting. That's exactly what happened in China when researchers examined a 1,000-year-old statue and discovered the preserved remains of a Buddhist monk. But this wasn't just an ordinary burial. The monk had self-mummified, a brutal process where he slowly starved himself while ingesting toxic herbs to prevent decay. If done correctly, he would be sealed inside a statue and worshipped as a living Buddha. And here's where it gets even darker. This wasn't an isolated case. Similar discoveries have been made across Asia, and in Mexico, an 18th century Christ statue was found containing real human teeth. Whether it was devotion, preservation, or something in between, one thing is clear: people took their religious relics very seriously. Number 8. Tools made from human bones. Well, most cultures mourn their dead. In ancient Teotihuacan, they used them. Archaeologists discovered that long before the Aztecs ruled Mexico, the people of Teotihuacan were turning human bones into tools, buttons, and combs. And no, this wasn't for ritual sacrifice. This was purely practical. When someone died, their flesh was carefully stripped using stone tools, and their bones were carved before they became too brittle. Femurs, skulls, and ribs were reshaped into everyday objects that outlived their original owners. It wasn't about disrespect. It was a way to keep the dead close. Instead of locking remains away, they turned them into something useful. something that stayed with the living. Some people inherit jewelry. These folks inherited a literal piece of their ancestors. If you need a bowl, why not make one from your grandmother's femur? Or perhaps a spoon from your grandfather's rib? It may seem morbid to us, but it was normal. Number 7. The Prehistoric Plague House. Well, this one is very creepy, trust us. A house filled with skeletons isn't exactly a good sign. At Mangha, an ancient site in China, archaeologists uncovered nearly 100 human remains crammed into a single circular structure. And they weren't neatly buried. They were piled. Something catastrophic happened here. The skeletons, mostly young adults, suggest a sudden, deadly outbreak. The disease spread so fast that the villagers didn't have time for proper burials. Instead, they stacked the bodies inside the house and sealed it shut. At some point, the structure was burned, either as an attempt to contain the plague or as an accident. And here's where things get even creepier. This wasn't the only mass grave like this. Similar sites across the region suggest an ancient pandemic wiped out entire communities. No written records exist, and no explanations remain. Just bones, ashes, and a warning from the past. Now let's move to number 6, the first boomerang victim. Boomerangs may seem like toys today, but they were once deadly weapons. In 2014, in Turale National Park, Australia, a local Aboriginal man discovered a skeleton near the Darling River. Recognizing it as an ancestor, William Bates named him Kakucha, older bro in the Bakanchi language. Kakucha had a deep gash from his eye to his jaw, originally thought to be from an iron blade, evidence of colonial violence. But paleoanthropologist Michael Westaway found otherwise. Kakucha had died 500 years before British arrival, and his wounds were from traditional Aboriginal weapons. Some injuries came from a lil club, but the facial slash was from a battle boomerang, the first archaeological proof of boomerangs in warfare. Kakucha's body, curled on his side, mouth open, suggested a violent end between 1260 and 1280 AD. His discovery reshaped history, proving boomerangs were more than hunting tools. They were weapons of war. Number 5. The first victims of war. For years, warfare was believed to have begun with farming, but a discovery at Lake Turkana, Kenya, shattered that idea. In 2012, archaeologists found 27 skeletons dating back 9,500 to 10,500 years, proving large-scale violence existed among hunter-gatherers. These weren't isolated deaths. Men, women, and children all showed signs of brutal killings. Many had blunt force trauma and projectile wounds. One woman had both knees shattered and her wrists positioned as if they had been bound before death. Researchers now believe these people were part of a semi-nomadic group that had settled by the lake. Whether they were attacked by rivals over resources or caught in an early territorial war, their remains show that organized conflict existed long before civilization. This discovery overturned assumptions about prehistoric society, proving that war wasn't a product of agriculture, it was ingrained in human history from the start. Number 4. The ancient chariot buried with its horses. Most ancient tombs contain the usual stuff: bones, pottery, maybe some gold. But in Bulgaria, archaeologists found something straight out of a historical fever dream. A Thracian chariot buried upright, with 2 horses still in their harnesses. The animals were positioned as if waiting for their rider to return. This wasn't some accident. The Thracians, a fierce warrior culture, believed in an afterlife where the dead needed their belongings. That meant their weapons, their treasures, and apparently, their horses. Unlike most ancient burials, this one had never been looted, leaving the ornate chariot perfectly intact. Researchers believe the horses were lowered into the pit alive using harnesses, a grim but methodical process that suggests just how seriously the Thracians took their passage into the next world. A chariot, 2 loyal steeds, and a final journey into the unknown. Some people take their afterlife prep way too seriously. Number 3, a man rose from the grave. In May 2015, a violent storm ripped through northwest Ireland, uprooting a huge 2-century-old beech tree. But tangled within its roots was something far older, a 1,000-year-old skeleton, yanked from the grave as the tree collapsed. The remains belonged to a Gaelic man, aged 17 to 20, who lived between 1030 and 1200 AD. His ribs and hands bore deep blade wounds, suggesting a violent death, possibly from a battle or personal dispute. Despite the brutal injuries, the body's original east-west alignment indicated a Christian burial. At 5 feet 8 inches, he was taller than most men of his time, likely from a wealthier family with access to a good diet. Since his burial predates the Anglo-Norman invasion of 1169, archaeologists believe he was of pure Irish descent. His grave remained untouched for centuries, until nature itself unearthed his story. Number 2, a debt collection gone wrong. In 1593, Prince Michael of Wallachia secured his throne with Ottoman gold. 2 years later, he turned against the Turks, launching a rebellion that would make him Michael the Brave. But while he was conquering fortresses, 3 Turkish janissaries, possibly his moneylenders, met a grisly fate in Bucharest. During renovations in 2010, archaeologists discovered their mangled remains in a pit, buried with animal bones, bricks, and pottery shards. This debris dated their deaths to the late 16th century, aligning with Michael's rebellion. The bodies told a horrific story. One man had a fractured collarbone, ribs, wrist, kneecap, hips, spine, and skull. Another had 18 wounds, while the third had a musket ball in his neck, an arrow in his ribs, and a crushed skull. 2 were partially beheaded. While their identities remain uncertain, their deaths were no accident. Number 1, mass graves from the Great Rebellion. In 2013, construction at Durham University uncovered a mass grave of over 1,700 Scottish soldiers, prisoners from the Battle of Dunbar in 1650, one of Oliver Cromwell's bloodiest victories. The battle was a disaster for Scotland, lasting less than an hour. 3,000 Scots were killed, 6,000 captured. The weakest were set free, but the rest were marched 100 miles to Durham. 1,000 died along the way, while others were executed for escaping. Those who reached Durham Cathedral were crammed into overcrowded, filthy conditions, where 1,700 perished from disease and starvation. Their bodies were dumped into pits on the castle's outskirts. DNA testing confirmed they were Scottish, with a few Dutch mercenaries. Other graves likely remain under modern buildings. What was meant to be a forgotten chapter of history has now resurfaced, a stark reminder of war's brutal toll. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon in the next one.